Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, which we bring you each week on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. You can listen on air, live or online at iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, nccradio.org, or on our own WHPC app. Download that and you can get all of our excellent programming from Nassau Community College WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. If you go to naturalnurse.com, you'll find out tons of information about all aspects of natural living. And today we are so happy to have on our line, all the way from far away in Thailand, our guest, Alex Scrimgeour, and he is a licensed acupuncturist and massage therapist with a degree in acupuncture and a diploma in Tunu massage from the College of Integrated Chinese Medicine. He has studied many different techniques, such as Vietnamese facial reflexology, and we're going to be talking about many of those on our show today. He gives treatments and teaches at many of the leading spas and wellness centers around the world, and he is based in London, but today we're getting him from much further than that. And his beautiful book that we will be discussing and reviewing today is called Facial Reflexology for Emotional Well-Being. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alex.
Thank you, Ellen. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you.
Let's go back in time to little boy Alex. Where did you grow up and what led you with all this interest in something that would be called Asian arts?
Okay, so going right back, I was born in London and I've lived most of my life in London. But when I was a kid, I actually grew up, I spent 2 years in Los Angeles. So when I was learning to speak, I had an American Californian accent. So it's not a typical London accent, but London's been my home. And I think getting into the holistic arts, I've always had an interest since I was a teenager in Asian philosophy and Buddhism and Taoism. And I got very into reading all about esoteric systems, shamanism, alternative health back in the 90s when I was a teenager. And eventually this led me to developing a real passion for Qigong, which is the Chinese form of yoga, where we're using breath and mind and gentle stretching for health and also for spiritual practice. So after, I think about 5 years of practicing Qigong with various teachers in London, I decided I really wanted to make this somehow part of my life in a big way. And I was very lucky to have a few family friends who are acupuncturists and suggested I study acupuncture. And this clicked in my early 20s. And I enrolled in a degree in acupuncture in England. And so that's where it started. And I haven't really looked back since then. I really clicked with Chinese medicine, and this led me to studying many different therapeutic techniques and arts. So I could maybe explain a little bit how I got to studying facial reflexology, which is my specialty.
Yes, absolutely. But I also want to ask you about the massage therapy, because that is an additional degree. Many people are either a massage therapist or they're an acupuncturist.
Within Chinese medicine, you could actually split it into 5 branches. Most people know acupuncture and maybe herbal medicine, but you've also got Qigong and you've got massage therapy and dietary therapy as well. And massage therapy is called Tui Na, and it's using the same theory as acupuncture. So it's using acupuncture points, the channels, the theories of yin and yang and the 5 elements and so on. But it's using the hands instead of needles. So it's actually a little bit more accessible if people have any kind of aversion or fear of needles. But in its own right, it's fantastic for healing particularly physical conditions. If there's injuries, it's very good at moving stagnation, really boosting all the blood stagnation. And often it's used in combination with acupuncture.
So I want you to define that term, because people familiar with Eastern medical terminology will know what you mean by blood stagnation. But people who are not familiar with that may have no idea. So can you explain what that is?
Sure, yeah. So this concept of blood stagnation is really foundational to Chinese medicine. And it's basically looking at the health. Our health is being very much related to blood circulation. So to have a healthy body, we need to have good circulation, good heart health. And when we have any contraction in the body, whether that's stiffness, when we're not moving, like if we're sitting in a chair all day long, or when we have a lot of cold in the body, when the muscles contract with cold, over time, this can create what they call blood stagnation, which you can sometimes see on the skin if the skin starts to change color. So a great example is if you consider the difference between a person in their 80s or 90s and a newborn baby. A baby, you'll never see a bruise so much. You know, they heal so quickly. If they fall over, which they do all the time, the bruise will heal in, a day or so. Whereas if you look at an older person, often their feet, their hands look very blue. The blood circulation has got very poor and slow. So this kind of gives an idea of what it's about. And Tuina and acupuncture, a big protocol is trying to basically move stagnation to increase the circulation. So you increase blood flow, and this can help with pain, but also many other kind of diseases and illnesses as well.
So I am looking at your exquisite book called Facial Reflexology for Emotional Well-Being. And I just think it's an excellent, excellent guide that no one has to have 30 years of studying Dian Chen or all the things you have studied. You wrote this book so anyone could pick it up and use the techniques. And also, when you're using them, it's really 1000% free because you don't have to buy any equipment. You don't have to be in a special place. You're not even talking about, necessarily purchasing herbs. It's such a simple thing to do that it's really exquisite.
Oh, thank you. I'm really delighted to hear that you enjoy it and that you see its potential. And absolutely, this is why I've written the book, to share this wonderful technique for self-healing. In Vietnam, where it comes from, it's very much used as a system of self-healing. So there's many clinics in Vietnam where you can go and have treatment, but they also run many workshops as well where people can learn how to use it on themselves for healing all sorts of problems. And it's unfortunately not very well known outside of Vietnam. So my goal for the book was to share some of the self-massage techniques that are relatively simple to perform on yourself.
So one thing is, some people may have heard of, because of course our audience here on Herbally Yours, and I do want to mention that we are bringing you this show today. We're bringing you Herbally Yours from the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, like we always do. And I do want you to know that you can get in touch with us also by email at whpc@nc3.edu. And our guest today is Mr. Alex Scrimgua. And I'm not quite sure how to say the last name, but the important thing is the book, Facial Reflexology for Emotional Well-Being. Now, since this is a show about natural medicine, Alex, which we've been on air since 1987. Actually, this show, I think, since 1990. So we have a large audience and they're interested in natural healing. And I'm sure most of our audience has heard of just the word reflexology. So what is different about facial reflexology?
Well, there's some similarities. We're using the same principle. One part of the body can affect the whole. The body is very interconnected. and that by working on certain points on a small part of the body, you can influence the body as a whole. One of the differences is with foot reflexology, which many people might have heard of. There tends to be one map that's overlaid on the foot, and you have all the organs and body parts on that map. Whereas with facial reflexology, there's actually about 25 different maps. So sometimes it's called multi-reflexology. And this enables it to have a little bit more dynamicism. So it's not just one part of the face that can treat an issue, or there's actually many different points and areas on the face that can be used. So this is one of the main differences. Another difference is that there's a number of massage tools that they developed in Vietnam, whereas typically with foot reflexology, the hands are just used, and maybe a massage stick in the Chinese style. Yeah, so that seemed clear to you, Ellen?
Yes, that was excellent. Now, in facial reflexology for emotional well-being, which is the full name of your absolutely beautiful book, which is available wherever books are available, Facial Reflexology for Emotional Well-being, why did you focus it on emotional well-being, which is, of course, when you started writing it, you probably wouldn't have known, is all the rage right now since the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. I think we're really suffering very much from the chronic stress of those years still. And so in some ways, this is my hope, is that people can use these techniques to help soothe and downregulate and release all the tension and stress that a lot of us are kind of still holding on our nervous system. But this kind of takes me back to my early research into Dien Chan. So in Vietnam, facial reflexology, the name for it is called Dien Chan. And when I first started learning it, at the same time, I was becoming very interested in the field of trauma, stress and trauma from the psychotherapy and from the neuroscience perspectives, because I was starting to realize that a lot of chronic health issues seem to be connected to stress, seem to be connected to emotion. And if we can understand stress and trauma, it seems that it has many positive effects for heart health, for breathing health, for digestive health, for sleeping. So I started to use this framework. And interestingly, if you look at where Dien Chan, where facial reflexology developed, it's not an ancient practice like acupuncture. It actually was invented after the Vietnam War in the late 70s.
Oh, that's interesting.
And they were actually originally trialing it in an addiction clinic. So many of the people who suffer from addiction, as we know now, have some kind of trauma in the past. And so it was my understanding that it was actually working very much on the trauma of the Vietnamese War, or the stress that, all the Vietnamese people have just been suffering for the last 10 years. And if you look at the neuroscience of trauma and how we understand it now, a lot of the top therapists and the real kind of forefront is using something called polyvagal theory, which is a new understanding of the vagus nerve, which is our parasympathetic nerve, which is basically the side of our nervous system we need to be in for healing, also for sleep and for digestion. And this polyvagal theory explains how our face is really key. It's a key part of our nervous system. It's known as the social orientation side of our nervous system. And basically, when our face contracts or is stressed, this actually tightens our nervous system. It speeds up our heart. It switches our nervous system into the fight or flight. And when our face softens, when we relax our face, this also switches the nervous system back into the relaxation response, the healing mode. And so because we're such social animals, we're constantly mirroring each other, and we're looking to each other to gauge whether we're in danger or in safety. So unconsciously, if we see someone and they look stressed and their face is tight and their voice sounds a bit monotonous or monotone, this will cue our nervous system to switch into the fight or flight, because perhaps they're seeing some kind of danger that we can't see, like a bear around the corner or something. And vice versa, if we see someone who looks smiling and their voice is sing-songy, then automatically we will start to shift because we are getting cued that we're in a safe environment. So I started putting these different theories together, and I realized that there's something about the face that's especially powerful for switching our body into healing, so switching it into the relaxation state, the healing state. So this is part of my understanding of the power of facial reflexology. It can be used in a very general way to support our nervous system and to soothe the mind and to release emotion.
So that's really interesting. I want to share some of the beautiful chapter names that you have in this book, because I think they are really fascinating. And by the way, who did the illustrations? Because, of course, if somebody wanted to try this system, get the book, Facial Reflexology for Emotional Well-Being. You lay it out as there's a lot of theory in here, which is exquisite. But there's also, as you go through the book, beautifully done illustrations, like even if you don't read the why, like just do this. So who did those illustrations?
Thank you. I'm really happy you like them. I actually got them commissioned by a friend of a friend who very luckily is trained as a medical illustrator.
That's why, because it's so beautifully accurate. And then you have, it's sort of developed in a way where you can see how massaging this and such point could affect other areas of your body. And listen to the beautiful names of these, like the golden elixir and the vagus nerve, Indra's net of jewels. I mean, just exquisite. Are these like known kind of names that you translated, or did you make these names up?
So they actually do come from different theories in Asian philosophy and medical philosophy as well. But I am very fond of storytelling and mythology and the symbolic way of seeing the world. And Chinese medicine is very much rooted in Chinese philosophy, which sees the world in symbolic terms. So when you hear the word, the golden elixir or Indra's net of jewels, they're kind of in a way metaphors for describing complex patterns in the world, in our body, that are easier to understand through these kind of more poetic terms.
So what is that? Now that I brought it up, maybe some of our listeners are wondering, what the heck does that mean? The golden elixir and the vagus nerve.
Well, yes. So just before I was describing about the vagus nerve, which is the biggest nerve in our body, and it's fundamental for healing, for health, for emotional well-being as well. So it actually is a cranial nerve that runs from just behind your ear through the face and then down through the throat into the heart and chest and then through the belly.
Well, to say, it's really related to the heartbeat. That's something
Absolutely.
That cardiologists are completely involved with being worried about, is your vagus nerve response.
Exactly, yeah. So it innervates our heart and our breath as well. It's essential for the functioning of our body and for self-healing as well. So if you look at Qigong and what they call internal alchemy in the old Chinese energetic arts, this phrase, the golden elixir, will pop up. So it's actually a practice called the golden elixir, which is using the mind to increase its awareness inside the abdomen. So typically our mind tends to be top heavy in our head, and they try and drop all our awareness, drop all their attention into the abdomen. Usually this is done with the breath. And there's a huge overlap here with the vagus nerve. And what's interesting is the vagus nerve is the nerve that actually gives us our internal sense of the body. So the feeling of your gut, the feeling of your heart beating, all the feelings that arise from within the trunk of your body, this is via the vagus nerve. It's called interoception. internal sense of what's happening inside your body. And the more that we can feel and the more that we can actually listen into that sense, the stronger our vagal tone will be. So the practice of the golden elixir, we can see as a method of actually increasing our vagal tone, which increases the sense of presence in the body, resilience, emotional resilience. But interestingly, I think it's not just looking at the nerve. There's some very interesting things that happen to the mind as well when we start to engage in this process. So hopefully just describing it like this will give you a kind of hint about what it's about. And yeah, in a way, my understanding of Dian Shan and Qigong and Chinese medicine, I'm trying to integrate all these things within the book, because it's not just about treating the face. It's actually trying to create a balance between the head and the heart and between the head and the belly. So when we release all the tension around the face, the head and the neck, this allows us to actually connect down into our heart, into our belly, and to feel more embodied. So this is another aspect of its therapeutic power.
Well, looking at the illustrations, of course, we're only on radio here, so we can't see what we're talking about. But in the book, Facial Reflexology for Emotional Well-Being, the drawings are very easy to follow. Like if somebody doesn't want to read all about the philosophy, let's say, and say, oh, I'll try this. Like I'm looking at the picture for scissor hands, and it's so clear to see where you put your fingers and the motion that you would use to stimulate that area. How would you describe how much pressure you put if you were going to use one of these reflexology techniques on the face?
Again, it's really about listening to what feels good. We instinctively all touch our face and massage our face without even thinking about it. And I think to get the therapeutic function, we basically want to bring a little bit more intention, a bit more power to the massage.
Well, do you want, I love reflexology. Okay. Reflexology was one of my first entries into natural medicine when I was walking down a street in Bisbee, Arizona. I remember it well. My son wasn't born yet, who's going to be 49. That's been a while ago. I was walking down the street and a book flew off the shelf and hit me. Okay. In the street. It was in actually Tucson, Arizona. So, they had like a book sale and they had the shelves in front of the bookstore. And this book flew off the shelf and hit me and fell on the floor in front of me. So I picked it up and it was called Zone Therapy. And I said, I don't know what this is, but I'm buying the book, obviously. So I bought the book. It was like 5 cents, in a used bookstore. And when I started reading that entire concept about how using certain points, this was on your feet, not the facial reflexology for emotional well-being that you're talking about, but as you said, a related technique. I couldn't believe it. But one of the things are that when you're doing it in the feet, at least, you want to go hard enough to where you feel it. In fact, I like it to where I'm screaming in pain. Not everybody likes that, but that's when I feel like I'm really getting those points. But what is the point here? Is it also enough pressure to where you feel individual points that might be blocked, or just making nicey nice like a massage?
Well, I think you're right, actually. The feet can take a lot of pressure, and they're taking tons of weight through them over the days that we. But with the face, obviously, it's much more sensitive, and so you don't want to use the same amount of pressure you would use on the feet. But you can be quite firm. So again,
well, is the point to find a sore area and then rub it, or is it more like?
Yes.
Okay, in that way, it is like reflexology.
Yeah, this is the shared principle. When you find those points that are more sensitive, it has a strong effect down into the body. As a very simple kind of guide, just finding those tight spots in the face or those sensitive areas and gently massaging them out can have a huge effect down into the body. Yeah, so it's there's some key differences between the feet and the face, obviously. I think also what you're mentioning about learning the techniques from the book. I did have many illustrations made of the exercises, but I've actually also created a video course to help those.
Definitely share that with us. Where would somebody find that, and more about you in general?
Yeah, so I've actually created a website, and the course is going to be up there, and it's really a companion course just to help people make it, that much easier to learn, because it's a little easier to learn through video than through a book. Even though the book, it's pretty clear, and it's relatively, I think you can just learn from the book, but if you want to go a little bit deeper, and I've created the course and a website, and it's called sensoryselfcare.com.
Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have that. Maybe we can add that to our description of the show. Sensory.
That would be great.
Selfcare.com. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And it's that website's written in the book as well. And it's just about to launch, actually. So the book was just released last week, and just finalizing the video course, which is all pretty exciting.
Well, that is really, really great. I want to, thank you so much for being our guest today, Alex. And people can find the book anywhere, Facial Reflexology for Emotional Well-Being. And also they can visit sensoryselfcare.com, which we will add to our notes about you, and where people can find out more, and they can actually revisit this show as well. So thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, Ellen. Thanks again.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai, at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us again next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.